Thank you everyone for coming. Just to get things started, I will we already talked about this, but the title of the talk is Amplifying Engineering Skills with Claude Code. So a couple questions for you guys. How many software developers in the audience? Okay, great. How many people have used Claude Code? And how many people use Claude Code daily? Okay. All right. I think we're gonna have some fun. So this is my take on Claude Code and what I've seen. So when I think about Claude Code, I have been using Claude Code on the $100 a month plan since about October. Um, Gotta say, it's the best $100 I've spent ever, and it's the best $100 I spend every month, right? I'm a huge Claude Code fan. For me, it has unlocked a lot of, well, I'll talk about it during the talk, but it's really sort of unlocked my imagination and unlocked the ability for me to dive into problems that I otherwise just wouldn't have gone after. So in terms of the talk here, what I'm going to be focusing on is really breaking it down into three different areas with a forward-looking fourth area. So the three different areas are coding, skills, technical research, and then this fourth area, putting the pieces together. This is my own kind of synthesis of the things that I've seen and how I'm trying to push the boundaries of what I think is possible, and also trying to get better use out of these tools. All right. What is Claude Code? I saw the number of hands go up. Everyone knows what Claude Code is. When I explain it to other people, the language I try to use around it is to say, it's actually really simple, right? It's a model with access to tools in a loop. That's it. It's a model with access to tools in a loop. There's a little bit of confusion as I explain it to my non-technical friends of, well, wait a second, is Claude, so Claude's not the company. The company is Anthropic, and then Claude is the AI stuff, but specifically there's something called Claude Code, but there's a model called Claude Sonnet, but then there's Haiku, and I've heard about this Opus thing, and it just kind of spins off goes off the rails a little bit. But again, really, it's just having the ability to have a model, which these models have gotten so good, to then be able to say you have access to tools in a loop. And when I talk about tools to people, I just describe it as, hey, you've gone to your web, how often do you pop open your phone or go to a web browser and load a web page? Well, guess what? That was a tool, right? Or do you search for anything on your desktop? Oh, think of that as a tool as well. So that's how I tend to describe it. I also sometimes will describe it this way, right? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Again, I'm a big Claude Code fan. So on the coding side, I'm actually giving the audience, I'm going to go relatively quickly through this. If you guys have any questions at any point, like please ask. Let's I'll steer this toward being more interactive. I'm going to put me over here for now. I'll move that again. So what is Claude Code as an example? So in this example, I open a terminal window, I ask a question. For people who use Claude Code, does it typically look like this for you guys in terms of the prompt that you're making is sort of a well thought out? Often you're not actually writing it in line in the terminal itself. You're using, a separate Sublime or some other text editor. One of the things that I find a lot is, can I see by show of hands, how many people are including curl statements? Is that a pretty common thing? Okay, so we'll spend more time on that one. But really the idea is, hey, give Claude something to do. One of the notes I have here is I say, I almost always ask a question in plan mode. Everyone know what plan mode is? Okay. So ask a question. What happens is Claude then fires off some sub-agents, does a bunch of research. It'll come back to you, given that it's in plan mode, it'll come back to you if it has any clarifying questions, right? So in this case, it's saying, well, how far should I go? Should I just do, I realize there are 5 different phases here. Should I just do 1 and 2, or should I go ahead and do everything? Then Claude will present a plan. I find that in my interactions with Claude, say over the past 6 to 8 months, earlier on, I would very, very often have to iterate on a plan 3 or 4 or 5 times. Now it's not as frequent, right? Now I can usually, 1 or 2 or 3 iterations and I'm kind of out of it. And I'm not sure if that's that I've gotten better at setting the context and asking the question, or if the models have just gotten that much better, right? I'm not sure. I don't know. Probably both, probably a combination, right? So then I approve and review, I review and approve, Claude does its thing, and then at the end, here's a summary of what we just did, right? So again, if you're used to using Claude Code, this is a pretty common, I would say this is kind of a pretty common workflow of, hey, go investigate something, figure it out, go write code. When I explain this to other people, I tend to talk about it as, look, us software developers for 20 plus years, we've been using things called integrated development environments, right? Even as recently as when AI tools started to come out, you've got like Cursor and GitHub Copilot, among others, Windsurf, et cetera, where you're using AI tools in the context of an IDE. Here, we're going back to, developers' favorite, user interface, which happens to be a terminal, right? So what did we do? Open the terminal window, ask Claude to do something, did it in plan mode, Claude asked for clarification, presented the plan, approved the plan, done. So any surprises? Like, this all fits your guys' understanding of kind of how you've used these tools? Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot here. My goals for this presentation. So when I think about this, it's okay. So not entirely sure the audience, like in terms of where everyone is at in terms of Claude, using Claude and familiarity with these skills. Some of the things I want you guys to get out of this, right? One of them is really to get inspired. Hopefully that'll come through later. Get inspired to the point of saying, oh, look, maybe I picked up one idea. Maybe I picked up one thing that I didn't know coming in, right? So when I say this is the tip of the iceberg, I'm assuming everyone in this audience already knows about this. You open a directory and you can say /init. What Claude will do is it'll build out a claude.md file, which is it's basically a redux of what's going on in that particular repo or directory. You can, of course, ask follow-up questions. This here, so curl is an amazing way to allow Claude to see what you see, right? So often you can just tell Claude, hey, go read this file, read this code, go look at the spreadsheet, go open this PowerPoint presentation, whatever it is, right? Except in certain circumstances, Claude can't actually do that because the page you want it to access is behind encryption, not encryption, it's behind authentication in some way, right? So one easy way to, I'm going to say, get around that is open developer tools, go to copy as curl, right? So when you copy something as a curl statement, it not only includes the URL, but it also includes the authentication, right? So if you have a JWT, if you're using auth tokens, that is part of the statement as well, right? So has anyone, I'm hopefully we're starting to get to the point of going from, oh yeah, everyone does this and everyone knows this, into, oh, okay, this is something new. Yeah, Stephen, go ahead. Literally the command curl. Yes. So Playwright works as well. So Playwright is excellent and amazing for having, like, you can tell Claude to say, hey, I want you to build this out, but I also want you to build out tests, right? And some of those tests that you can build out are UI, UI tests, and do it through Playwright, right? So Stephen, are you saying that you actually, you say, hey, use Playwright to go do this? Yeah.
Because it'll literally launch the browser, it'll figure out how to log in. Like with Google, I got an expert on it. Like I used it in it launches Google's development browser.
Right. Yeah, it launches the headless browser around it. Let's just see a quick show of hands. How many people have used Playwright as part of this? Okay, perfect. Everyone knows this. Okay, cool.
I never used Perl.
Okay. Yeah, so good. Okay, so I checked the box for you. That's great. So this ends up bypassing the thing I wanted Claude to look at, it can't have access to because it's behind some sort of authentication wall. Well, guess what? You just authenticate, your JWT is in there, copy as curl and go. Right.
So Ryan, are you talking about like in the document that's online, you have to like a Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet, and you don't want to download it, so you'll just have it.
No. So thanks for asking about that. So let's take this example here, which is that I'm going to do this, which is one of the things that my wife and I signed up for a while ago was something called Home Chef, right? It's like a Blue Apron, meal service, right? I'm assuming you guys are familiar with these types of things. So in here, notice that I'm logged in, right? And I can see all of the meals that we've ever gotten from them. Oh, great. Here's 434 recipes. And I can go in and I can search for something, right? I'm looking for just steak recipes. Okay, perfect. What I'm talking about in terms of curl is if I do this and I bring up I bring up DevTools, right? And then now I say, let me do this, make this, sorry, bear with me. So if I search for chicken, notice what I did here. I said meal selections, right? And you can see, it's giving me the top 11. There's 191 total. Right. Okay. So top 12 here, sorting by date. And then if you look at the headers, right? So down here, meal hand session, like here's a session ID, right? So the concept is this, which is if I go here to copy as curl, yeah, I'm on Wi-Fi. Good. All right, we're gonna have some fun. So here, I'll just run Claude from here. Right. What did I have in my example? I had something like, what do you see here? Right. So when I say copy as curl, this curl statement, so instead of just copying the URL and like, oh, you open this in your browser, this curl statement includes additional details such as the token. Right. So we'll let this thing cook and then come back to it. So I will leave that there. Question. Yeah, go ahead.
By default, when you give a URL as part of a conversation,
Mhm.
it internally uses a curl to go and pull the content.
It actually does. So curl is the mechanism that Claude Code uses to execute a URL. The reason I'm saying, oh, do it as curl, I mean, it's really a URL, but I'm just borrowing from language they have in the browser, where if you right click on something, it's copy as curl.
So then you can add any kind of option that the curl command supports, like -k if you're going to insecure sites and
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Right. And if you look here, you can see there's other, it has headers in here. It's got fetch mode cores, same origin, et cetera. Right. So, now you can see, all right. So this is a Home Chef API endpoint returning cookbook history. Recent picks include Irby chicken couscous, among others. So that might be too small to read, but yeah, go ahead. So the question is, if you're on a web page, does your token time out, right? And I'm going to make the assumption now that your token is a JWT token, right? So JWTs do time out, but usually, like typically the timeout ends up being on the order of like half an hour or an hour, right? Rather than, so if you're about to do something, right click, copy as curl, run the command, go, Claude can see what you see. if you were to then say, oh, well, let me take that same command and do it in 3 weeks, you're going to need a new token. Yeah. 1 and then 2. Yeah.
So any of these token or any parameter that you add, is that actually available only to you, or is it actually getting stored in Anthropic for training their models?
So here, so the question is, well, wait a second. I just asked Anthropic a question where I sent it something, right? Now, hey, does Anthropic have access to this, right? 2-part question, right? So one part of it is in Anthropic and Claude Code, you can say, don't train on my data. So there's a way you can go into settings and do that. The second is these tokens do expire, right? So, okay, let's say it does have some token that expired 3 weeks ago. Like, it doesn't really matter, right? It's not like you're giving them the private key. You're just giving them the token.
Yeah, but sometimes you use username password. That means that password is there with somebody. So,
well, that's kind of a separate question, but yes, yeah, exactly, right? So you could do this as, yeah, you were mentioning insecure or unencrypted, or that there are things that you can do that expose data to these systems, right? To Claude Code and Anthropic, right? Yeah, go ahead.
As an example, a computer use, because Claude Code supports that.
Yeah.
And create an environment which it does.
Mm-hmm.
And if they use the username password for this site, and it will get up anyway.
Yeah, I mean, could you do that? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. There's many ways to skin a cat. This is, for me, this just happens to be one that I use, with some regularity of, I'm working on systems that require logging in, and then therefore, I just piggyback on the token and I'm good to go, right? Okay. So asking follow-up questions, so letting Claude see what you see in terms of tokens. Claude knows core engineering principles, right? We in this room are software developers by trade. We have learned valuable knowledge as it relates to engineering patterns, best practices, etc. Claude knows those. You just have to tell it, right? So for example, if you want to work in a red light, green light, a red, green TDD world, just tell Claude Code, red, green TDD. Oh, great. I see what you're trying to do. Let me write the test first. Oh, now I see everything is red. Okay, let me start building this out. Right. I remember when I first discovered this, I was like, oh, if I, for example, if I say dry, right? Notice what it ends up doing is, oh, perform a dry code review. Hey, I can see this, dry being don't repeat yourself, right? It knows those things. How would everyone say their experiences with asking Claude Code to code review code? Generally positive, somewhat negative? Like, how do you guys feel about that? Yeah, so one of the things I found, and I did this a few months ago, I haven't really gone back to it, is when I'll ask it to code review something, if I'm saying code review this, find errors and fix them or whatever, it will find issues. And even if you've you do your first round, great, I found some issues. Now you do a second round, oh, found more issues. Like it'll just keep going. Like it'll keep trying to please you in terms of, you can get in a code review loop forever. Right. Okay. So the way when I think about Claude Code, I think about it as, hey, imagine I had an awesome teammate. What would this awesome teammate do, right? What would it be like working with this awesome teammate, right? Early on it was, oh, these coding systems and models, they're, it's like having an intern that's, an inch each deep and a mile wide, and, some things like that. But if you really think about it as, hey, what are some ways, if I had someone else's help with this and they can take care of the menial parts, like, imagine what I could do. So one of the things I did, and let me set this up, which is for a particular project, we had, it's a product that has something like 20 API endpoints. Those 20 API endpoints were not the fastest, right? Like, hey, they needed to be optimized. So what I did was I went down a path with Claude Code where I said, let's build out a workflow whereby here are the API endpoints, like Claude discovered the API endpoints in this thing, right? Next is to say, when you make changes, I do not want you making changes to the file itself. What I want you to do is to build a standalone on the side test file, and we're going to use that to iterate, right? So specifically it is, okay, so this says, endpoint shows a scale problem. The baseline is a standalone test file. Then under explore, the idea is, hey, let's actually test out multiple approaches, right? So Claude, think through ways that we can make this faster and test it in the test file. Don't test it in the, the quote production code, right? So if you set it off and have it go do that, guess what it does? It says, oh, great, I'm going to write some code because it loves writing code. So then it, writes 3 different tests, runs them and says, oh, well, that's interesting. I was expecting B to be fast, but it turned out C was fast. I wonder if I combine the part from B with this part from C, and oh, there's this other idea as well. Let me write out D, E, and F. It's off to the races, right? So what I found with this, and I was kind of shocked at how effective this was. It would come back with something and say, oh, look, I took it from 30 seconds to 12 seconds. I'd say, okay, we'll keep going, right? Think of other ways to do this. How can you push it forward? And I really found a multiplicative effect of this I would do it for one endpoint, get that endpoint faster. And then because it's all in the same code and same repository, it was then able to borrow ideas from improving other endpoints to then improve the next endpoint, right? Anyone gone down this route? Yeah, okay. All right. Cool. So for this one, I felt like it was more of a tightrope type situation. I kept having to kind of steer it back on like, no, don't actually update the code, like update the test file instead. So next is what about when things go wrong, right? We've been using these tools for a while. Do things go wrong? Ever? Yeah. So yeah. So here's your well-structured plan. So this actually happens to be my son graduated from Vanderbilt last week. So this is your well-structured plan. This is Claude code sometimes.
Summa cum laude. Hannah Geiger. Melanie Elizabeth Gerko.
So Claude gets there, but maybe not in the path that you were expecting. Right. So here are some ways that I work with Claude code, and tell me if these resonate with you. So I'll kind of fly by, right? Context is key. There have been advancements in terms of the context window has gone from 200K up to 1,000,000K, or up to 1,000,000K, sorry, up to up to 1,000,000 tokens. But one of the things I've noticed here on context is I am hyper vigilant about being aware of and protecting the context window. So even when it was at 200K, I would notice if I got above something like 40%, 50%, the quality and performance would just take a nosedive for reasons that weren't immediately obvious. But I could find that I could say, okay, let me stop what I'm doing. Let me open a new session and kind of run with it from there. Often the new session, I would actually ask Claude, okay, your context is getting too full. What should I prompt you in the next session so that we can keep going? And generally speaking, it would give a pretty good response. So context is key, providing the proper access, in terms of code and APIs. Session management is something that, again, kind of goes hand in hand here. And then plan mode, of course, and then Claude skills. And Claude skills kind of goes into the second part of the talk here. Let me pause here. Does anyone have anything they would add to this list in their own experience?
As far as context is concerned, I feel like it's my experience.
Yeah.
Like, too much going on by doing the startup.
Uh-huh.
Right? If you say compact, it would actually, clean it up, summarize.
Yep.
Then you can actually ask it that, hey, what did you summarize?
Mm-hmm.
Tell you that, hey, this is what I understood. No, you got it wrong. Then go on.
Right. So in case everyone couldn't hear, so the comment was around, oh, one of the things you can do is you can do compact, right? You can compact the context window. Early on, I use that quite frequently. I've actually really largely moved away from it, right? I'll reset the context window. I'll just exit out, come back in. I almost never compact these days. That's what I found works for me. If you know, yeah, I mean, if your mileage is better, like, you know, by all means, go for it, right? Another thing I would say here is that tips and tricks that I used 6 to 8 months ago have evolved as Claude Code itself has evolved, right? So there was a period of time where, given the smaller context window, I was very often saying, hey, let's keep an external tracking document. And, you know, you do a bunch of stuff, write to the tracking document, close the session, start the session, read the tracking document. Now we keep going, right? You know, Claude stores plans now, right? Which is something that it didn't used to do.
My personal stuff, I use GitHub issues like Taylor, style.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
Pretty reliable.
Okay.
It's around ethics. So it's sort of a step above. I did the to do or whatever open issues thing on Markdown.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, oh, nice. So the comment is, okay, so you can keep these things as a little sidecar on disk, but if you're hooking up to GitHub anyway, there's GitHub issues. So that's something to look at. Yeah, I like that.
Probably similar. I use Compose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Got it. Cool. Cool. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Like, for example, the scenario that I'm thinking about is like a whole very big project.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for a heavy refactoring, like the way the code used to work and now I'm changing. So is that context usage means like I can't ask it a generic question that, hey, like, no, I want to do, currently code is doing A and now I want to do it B. I shouldn't do that because it's not gonna work.
So context, so here's our session, right? This is what we were doing. You know, we had loaded something. Notice here, this has this little 4%. This 4% is we've used 4% of our context window. And if I type in /context, it gives you this little diagram here, right? Hold on. This little diagram here in terms of context usage. So you can see that there. Over time, they have made this even better in terms of how, you know, which things are taking up how much space, right? So for example, is it the system prompt? Is it the system tools? Is it memory? Is it skills? You know, what is using this space? So I think so the initial question that gets asked, right? You can think of it as input tokens and output tokens, right? And you can basically give it like a massive novel. Well, I'm going to answer the question this way, which is where context comes into play is when you have lots of back and forth, right? So you ask a question, it goes for a while, it comes back. Okay, let me ask a follow-up question, goes for a while. Let me ask a follow-up question. So you might be 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour into a session. You know, for me, if I'm over, like with this size of model, if I'm anywhere in the like 30% range, I'm ready to call it and move on to the next session. Right. So that's kind of my guidepost.
Is it like sometimes like, you know, we go to a rabbit hole kind of stuff where like, okay, like we are going wrong path after some time.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all, you know, backed by a neural net and the model and all of this stuff. Right. But it's, yeah, I have found that as far as like attention goes, it doesn't do as good of a job at answering questions if you're deep in the context, right? And you can also think of it as, you know, hey, welcome, I've got a new intern joining today. Step 1, read the US tax code. Step 2, now I'm going to ask you a question about something, right? Where it's just like, you know, maybe if you didn't have them do that first and instead say, you know, read the index. And if you need to go further, go take a look at something else. Yeah. Does that help?
So
Okay.
like, the generic, like the specific questions are way better at specific quest than the generic one.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I think I would say the takeaway is be mindful that context exists and that performance degrades as the context window fills up. So if you ever think you're starting to get results that are not what you think they should be, doing some of these session management techniques, whether it's rewinding or branching or resetting or compacting even, are things to look at. Question? Yeah.
Or to have product Claude and your topic. They've all talked about how last year in October the models.
Yeah.
They haven't touched the people to code for over almost a year now.
Right. Yeah, that, I mean, there was really an inflection point in terms of the quality of the models, right? The underlying, you know, Claude, Sonnet, Opus, et cetera, like around November of last year. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Just wanted to add to that.
Yeah. Okay.
To specify the specifications, all the things, it helps you work through what you want to be on.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But on SpecKit.
Yeah.
A year ago, to get good results out of Claude, I had to use SpecKit.
Okay.
The plan mode in Claude has approved.
Yeah.
That I find myself skipping SpecKit.
And going straight to
getting
the
the
plan
same
mode.
result.
Yeah, I find that I use plan mode almost all the time. Yeah, I get good results out of that.
Quick thing, so if
Yeah.
you're doing like a coding task, it's always better to keep that window cleaner. And all the discussion setup that you're doing, you just do it in a separate window.
Mhm.
And when you have like a, clear cut, like crux examples, what you want it to do.
Yeah.
Then go back to your coding terminal. Don't try back and forth small questions in the coding terminal.
Right.
Because that gets a little bit more confusing.
Yeah, because I mean, it's you're kind of,
Yeah.
you know.
Plus it gets easier to like track your, backtrack as well.
Mhm.
The biggest issue, they do the first build very good, no matter what you give them.
Yeah.
But it is when you want to try and change that.
Mhm.
So that's where more problems will start coming.
Right. Yeah, go for it.
Spec-driven. What I'm seeing is that there's an explosion in spec-driven development.
Mhm. Yeah.
Specs are pretty good. For at least for the existing systems.
Mhm.
And you usually do not do a plan for a very big system, which is very difficult to do a plan for something very big.
Yeah.
Something small is easy. So people are still taking specs written by Claude forward
Mhm.
and feeding it into the code to do it. So that's why now spec-driven development all of a sudden is back in the.
Right. Yeah. What is old is new again, I guess. So next, Claude skills. Everyone use skills? Okay, I'll go pretty quickly through this. So extremely simple concept, right? Think of it as like the index in a, in a manual, right? So level one of, name and description, right? What is this thing and what can it do? Level two here is the skill itself, right? Which is just markdown description of some set of guidelines or rules or workflow or something. And then level three is there's access to resource and code, right? That gets loaded dynamically. So for example, we got a couple examples here. One is you can use it to capture conventions, right? So in this project in particular, there are certain idioms around how dates are handled. So just tell Claude, right? Just put in a skill file. Just tell Claude how to do it. The second one here, this is for this project, testing involved both an eval framework, which happened to be PromptFoo, and then end-to-end tests using the AWS Strands eval framework. So not necessarily vanilla things, especially in combination. So tell it what to do, give it scripts, right? The third one here was troubleshooting, right? And you can kind of think of this as, okay, so we write code, we then deploy it, it's out in the wild. This example is around saying, well, wait a second, how do we actually troubleshoot that out in the wild? And, a pretty common thing is, and in this example, it is saying there is an agent that's deployed, like a chatbot agent, and that chatbot generates S3 session data. It also generates CloudWatch logs, right? So if someone comes and asks you a question of saying, hey, I actually had, I asked the agent a question, 2 days ago and it didn't give me the right answer. Well, what would you do? You'd say, well, let me fire up the logs, let me fire up the session data, let me go dig through all this and find it. That is a great problem to hand off to Claude, right? So here, this skill ends up becoming, guess what? You know about S3 data, so here's how you can download the session data, here's how you can fetch the logs, here's how you can analyze the behavior. Just tell this to Claude and he'll go do it, right? One other thing about skills, if you think there's a barrier to entry in terms of writing skills, Anthropic actually publishes a skill that's called the skill creator skill, right? So you can use that to create a skill, which, you're working in a session. Hey, we just did something interesting. Okay. Use the skill creator skill, write this up as a skill. Done, right? It's pretty cool. All right. So next is technical research, right? I'm calling this technical research as in, hey, I want to dig into something and kind of understand what's going on with it, right? So it's also known as the new, let me Google that for you, right? But it's also a lot more than that. So one of the patterns that I use here is to say, let me just write out findings, right? So I'll ask Claude a bunch of questions, we'll iterate on something, and then I'll say, okay, write this up. I want to share it with a collaborator. Whether or not I actually share it with a collaborator is a different story, but hey, write this thing up as a markdown file, right? That's one pattern that I use. So a specific example of that, and this is a case study in terms of research, which is, imagine the following, right? Imagine you work on a data dashboarding platform, and your product manager comes to you and says, you know what? Let's add reports to this platform. And you say, cool, let's add reports. Why not? Do you have any examples? Right. So then, she thinks about it for a while, comes back in a week and says, oh, here's a zip file that has, 20 sample reports that we've generated by hand for clients. Great. Perfect. Right. So in terms of amplifying engineering skills, the way I would approach this and the way I actually approached this problem was to say, okay, perfect. Step 1, download zip files from email. Step 2, extract the files. Step 3, launch Claude Code and prompt it. So Claude, here's the background. We're exploring a reporting feature. Read all the files and generate a markdown file with your findings, right? So it generates something like this. Example report analysis, date, source, inventory at a glance, different report type, taxonomy, et cetera, right? Okay, cool. Now the next step is, well, wait a second. This is a data dashboard platform. The code is right there. So you can say, Claude, guess what? I want you to analyze whether the platform can generate these reports. Okay, well, Claude, read the code, read the specific data examples in terms of JSON. You point it to the API, you point it to the underlying data store and say, go, figure it out, right? So then what does it come back with? It comes back with, oh, okay, it starts introducing topics like data readiness level, right? So if you have, here's 20 example reports that come in 5 different categories, and then the platform itself has 88 API calls that can populate that number of panels within this dashboarding product, how do you reconcile all of that? This is the type of problem that Claude absolutely loves, right? So, then kind of breaking it down by report type, here's the summary matrix, here's some strategic observations around it, et cetera. So then step 3 is, okay, create a sample report, right? Create report number 1. And it does, using real data, because you pointed at real APIs. So think about this, right? 2 years ago, how long would this have taken? Seriously, like, how long would this have taken? Oh, it would have taken a team of people, 2 weeks to kind of dig in here and figure it out. Wall clock time, start to finish, this was 22 minutes. It was amazing, right? And yeah, so that's part of the reason why I love all this stuff. Are you guys having similar experiences to this? It's pretty common. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, they wrote code. I typed in the code to do this, and I already submitted it.
When the PM says that?
That's what RPMs do.
Oh yeah.
they're like, hey, I would go add report.
Uh,
And they're like, oh, by the way, I typed it, already did it. Build a framework.
well, I think that is a question that all of us are going to have to grapple with over the next few years. So I don't have the answer on that one. Yeah. So this is the last part of the talk. So all of that is kind of, here are my interactions with Claude Code. Here's kind of how I think about it and how I've been, structuring different ways of approaching problems. This is me kind of pushing the boundary a little bit, right? They talk about as good artists borrow, great artists steal. If you guys don't read Simon Willison regularly, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's my plug for him. So I'm gonna mention a couple different concepts here. So one of them is this concept of a stateful sandbox. Okay, so now I've got Claude Code. Like, where do I run this stuff, right? Where do I run the agent? Where do I run any artifact that the agent creates? Well, Simon talked about this back in January. How many people are familiar with fly.io as a hosting provider? Right. So the folks at Fly, they created something called sprites.dev. They describe these as disposable, like ballpoint pens of Linux machines, as in, hey, you want to spin up a Linux machine? Like, boom, it's there ready for you. The biggest thing about this is the machine will sleep if there's no activity for 30 seconds, it'll go to sleep, and its wake up time is ridiculous. It's like 100 milliseconds. And it's absolutely insane, right? So this is something I've kind of stumbled across as, okay, this is a nice tool to have in one's toolkit, the sprites concept. They did a blog post back in January, back when OpenClaw had the name Moltbot, which had the name ClaudeBot before it. But so remember when OpenClaw was the whole rage, right? So if you take Claude, OpenClaw, and sprites, kind of combine all those, I just said, okay, great. What's something that's useful to me? I play tennis. February, the weather is terrible, so I want to find indoor courts. So what did I do? I built a Claude skill to then, you can see here, skills, tennis court, etc. That I then deployed as part of OpenClaw so that I could ask it a question. Tennis bot, how about anything? How about anything on the following Monday? Anything before noon? And then it runs the skill and says, oh, well, at this court, there are these times. At that court, there's those times. Pretty cool. Keeps me from having to pop open my browser. Okay, I like that. So the same pattern, I've reused this a couple different times on other OpenClaw things, right? But the core concepts behind what's driving OpenClaw, it's all progressive disclosure, it's all markdown files, it's all skills. So if you're familiar with Claude skills, you'll feel right at home kind of in this universe. Next, Claude Code on your phone. Who uses Claude Code on your phone? Okay, I'm seeing a few. Okay, good. So remember I was talking about technical research patterns, right? So first is Claude Code for, this is the most inane, like the naming on this is not great. It's called Claude Code for Web, but it actually runs on your phone. Okay, fine, right? So back in October, they announced Claude Code for Web, which you can get to on your phone. Then, so technical research, it actually doesn't need to be run from your computer. It can be run from somewhere else. So Simon has a great, he's got this article here, which he did in November, where he's talking about saying using asynchronous coding agents to then complete these research tasks, right? And by a research task, it's above and beyond simply asking a question, getting an answer. It's like, oh, you're going to deal with code, right? Grab this repo, grab that repo, run a simulation here, do this, get the results, etc. So he set this up. The magic behind it is actually this agentsmd file. So he's got instructions here that say, start by creating a new folder for your work with an appropriate name, create a notesmd file in that folder and append your work to it as you go, build a readme.md report at the end of your investigation, Your final commit should have the following things. Don't include full copies of really large things. Right. So I said, okay, cool. Like, I'll try this out. So now I can pop open my phone, and here's an example. I play ultimate frisbee. I've got the frisbee on the 20-yard line. My opponent's on the, or my teammates on the 30-yard line. How hard do I need to throw it if he can run, a 100-yard dash in 11.2 seconds? Okay, right? And it says, oh, cool, I can do that, right? So here's how you calculate it, right? So you wait 3 seconds, then you throw it at 32 miles an hour at a 10-degree angle, and therefore, he'll catch it right on the goal line. Another example here. So this is bridge hand analysis, right? So it's a simulation to calculate the percentage of bridge hands with each amount of high card points that can make a game level contract. If anyone knows bridge, my second son plays on the Chicago bridge team, where that question came from. Generate a report, include mermaid diagrams. I ask the question, this thing pops out. So then, this is in the repo itself, and I'll show you this. So in the repo itself, this is research private. In the repo, there's a summary of these research tools as well, right? So each question that I ask, it gives me a summary of, oh, this is what this thing looks like.
Right, question about this.
Yeah.
Where does it pop out? You're saying the report popped out somewhere? Like,
so remember, I mentioned it as create a folder. So it creates a folder here, right? So in this folder, in this repo, there's a README, and then this README this is the report.
oh, so it's posting in the GitHub?
Yeah, exactly. So it's in a Git repo. So the whole thing is a closed loop in a Git repo.
Skill says posted to GitHub.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, summarizing that is you're effectively using the web coding agent, not giving it a coding problem, you're giving a reset problem.
Exactly.
You're using the coding paradigm of a repo to store the output.
100%. That's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. So then, so technical research doesn't need to be run from a computer. It also doesn't need to be limited to a static report. Okay. What might that mean? So remember we talked about sprites? So I built out the following. So I added support for deploying a web app onto a sprite, right? So it's basically in the agents MD file, tell it, oh yeah, by the way, if you're creating a web page, or if you're creating a web app, put it in a deploy folder, and here are some instructions in terms of how it's going to get deployed. And then build a GitHub workflow that says, oh, if a deploy folder exists, it gets deployed to a sprite. Okay. And then automate the whole thing. I don't want to think about it, right? So what Simon had set up was you'd ask the question in Claude Code for Web. You'd have to go into Claude Code for Web. You'd have to create a PR. You'd have to go over to GitHub. You'd have to accept the PR. Then you'd have to, there were a bunch of steps in between. So basically just automated all of those out, right? So now I can ask a question on my phone and I get an email 20 minutes later, 15 minutes later, with a link that says, oh, I've deployed your web app to here, right? So, and now the fun begins, right? So this is what I've kind of been playing around with in the past week or so. So my first cut at this was tic-tac-toe, right? So build and deploy a website that allows me to play tic-tac-toe. Make it fun, right? Have it be sailboats and tennis balls. Okay. I don't know if this is valuable to anyone, but it's a tic-tac-toe app, right? Okay, that's a good hello world. Next, I was playing a card game with my family called Up and Down the River, and one of the questions was, well, as we're progressing through this game, how does the probability of what you bid change based on not only the cards that are dealt, but also kind of how deep you are in the set of tricks, right? So, you can see here, I was playing this game. Ultimately, I want to be able to play against end computer opponents, think it through, go ahead and build it out. Also, my son's college graduation at Vanderbilt University, so make it Vanderbilt themed in some way, right? So This is called Up and Down the River. There's like Anchor Down, Commodore Edition, Door, Vandy, Captain. Okay. I don't know. I thought that was pretty. I like that. So next, right? Hey, I've been reading about Simon Willison's Git scraper pattern. Okay, as a starting point, I'd like to get a better understanding of what public APIs are available. So I'm asking this on my phone while I'm sitting in the stands, watching his graduation. Go, right? So this ends up creating, oh, here's the website, right? Here's 20 public API sites that you can use. Okay, next question, right? Read the API folder, find an API that has lat long data, although I'm doing this on my phone, so it called it as last long data. It's okay. Lat long data, call the API to validate that it's actually lat long. Build a new project. Hey, show me something interesting. I don't even know what's going to pick of those 20. What it ends up picking is there are 85,000 airports in the world, and it's slicing and dicing. You know, I had it pick a random airport. Here's a bunch of curated things. So we're looking at the McLaughlin Heliport in Port Angeles, you know, near the Orca Islands up in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, pretty cool, right? My second son is going to spend the summer in Germany. So same deal here, right? Hey, he's going to be in Germany from July to September. He's going to be in Ilmenau, like plan out interesting weekend trips for him. Okay, it did. Here's the map. Here are the, like, so instead of me saying, hey, let me PDF this markdown file and send it to you, and what do you, like, no, just log into this website. Here's a URL. Like, just go look at it. Where to have lunch? We're driving home. We're like literally on the road. You know, I'm at Interstate 40, you know, about to head north on Interstate 81. We want to have lunch in the next hour and a half. Where should we go? Okay, so this is the last one. I'm kind of throwing a lot of things out here. You know, oh, I'm sailboat racing, right? Ideally, this project would incorporate an understanding of the wind. It would also have, you know, ability to understand the tide as well. So, you know, here we are. This is Annapolis. This is where we're setting off from. Here's different, you know, nautical things. You know, tide, knots. Okay. So let me pause there. That's actually the end of that's the end of the talk.